Darkcast Network, the light shines brightest on our indie podcasts.
A 17-year-old boy leaves his home in church ground Nevis on Saturday, April 28, 2012. He tells his family he's going out for a walk. Nothing unusual there. Nevis is a small yet gorgeous Caribbean island, and this Saturday afternoon seemed like any other on the surface. But when Dylon didn't return home, his family immediately knew something was wrong. They called Nevis Police Saturday evening, and a search began. But what could have been a simple story of a teenager staying out past curfew actually went much deeper. Could a crime that Dylon had recently witnessed have led to his disappearance? When a person goes missing, there's a special kind of pain in the not knowing. I want to tell the stories of those who never came home. I want to tell you the story of Dylon Clarke. I'm Kona Gallagher.
And I'm Ethan Flick.
And this is And Then They Were Gone. Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you for joining us here once again. Now, this episode is a little bit different from what we usually do. We mentioned in our last episodes that Ethan has actually been out of the country for a little while.
That's right.
Yeah, and I was actually able to go join him for just a few days. And you're back now.
I am back here.
Yeah, and so now we can actually talk about like where we were.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not that we're just like weirdly secretive people, but you were there for work, and so like we couldn't talk about it until you were not there anymore.
Correct.
But yeah, so now we can talk about how you spent nearly 2 weeks in Nevis.
Yes. Tropical island. I was 900 feet above sea level on the side of a volcano.
Yeah. It was incredible. It was a place like we're dumb. I mean, I think that if you've listened to the show, like, you know that, like, we are like dumb people. And so neither one of us like knew what Nevis was or that it was even pronounced Nevis, because you've been calling it Nevis for like, you know, as long as you've known about it.
Yeah.
And I found out like after my plane landed and I started listening to all the people talking, I was like, oh yeah, that is actually not what this place is called.
Nevis.
Nevis. Now, Nevis is, like I said, in the Caribbean. It's actually the sister island of St. Kitts. Mm-hmm. And St. Kitts and Nevis, like, they form a federation. I think I actually talk about that in this actual episode. I'm probably like pre-repeating myself right now. But yeah, it's like south of Puerto Rico, near like the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Yeah, the Lesser Antilles.
Yeah, Barbados.
Yeah.
All places I've never been either, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, same.
Yeah. So it was wild. And now that like we're back, we're going to post, because we still haven't posted any of our photos.
No, none.
And we have like some amazing ones. There are monkeys everywhere.
Yep, monkeys
and we got,
on my front porch.
Yep, and we got woken up by like a really aggressive roosters, like incredibly aggressive roosters.
5 a.m. every day.
Yeah, well, no, because it would change time, and that's the part that I thought was kind of funny, is that it was like between 5 and 6:30, and you never knew.
Yeah, and also the whole thing about roosters crowing when the sun comes up.
Oh,
like,
no,
that's not real.
No, not
they
at all.
crow whenever they
want. It was great. So anyway, while I was there, and again, I was only there for like 4 days. But while we were exploring the island, I was really curious to know more about the day-to-day life of the people who live there, because like, honestly, it's unlike any place that I had ever been before. And one of the things that really made it stand out to me was that every single person that we met was somehow the nicest person we had ever met. And not like fake tourist town nice, because I feel like you can see right through that. And like, I appreciate the seething rage that's generally like underneath those interactions. But like, they just felt genuinely kind. And so when I did, start kind of looking into things and digging around a little bit, I was somewhat surprised to like find that there is a little bit of a criminal element on the island. And it mainly seems to be comprised of young men, many of whom are even juveniles.
Right.
Now, this isn't to say that we're like blowing the lid off of like this perfect island and, uncovering some scandal or anything like that. Like there's crime everywhere, obviously.
Yeah. And it was a very safe place. I mean, it's one of the safest places I've ever felt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. But, we're a podcast about missing people. So I wanted to cover one from this like fascinating place that we had the opportunity to visit. But before we get into that, we do have a few more people who have joined us over on Patreon. So thank you very much to Claire D, Lauren C, Chelsea B, Hannah, Nicole B, Al, Ruby G, Kirsten R, Ayumi, Lauren M, Mary L, Caitlin W, Jesus R, Colleen W, and Sal M. We very, very, very much appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And if you would like to join us over on Patreon, you can get those episodes early and ad-free, along with Ethan's show about mental health that he is extremely behind on writing episodes for.
Yep. Still haven't finished.
Yeah. He was in Nevis for 2 weeks.
Yep.
Didn't do that.
No. I was just so busy with work.
Oh, yeah. So busy. Anyway, he is Ethan Flick 1 on Twitter if you would like to yell at him directly.
Right,
Thank you. I don't even know if that's your actual Twitter name.
I don't know either.
No idea.
I think. Maybe. I don't know.
It's something like that. Is there an underscore? I don't know. I have no idea. Anyway, just find him and yell at him. It's fine. Now, because this story takes place on Nevis, which is a tiny, tiny island of about only 12,000 people, I don't have a lot of biographical data that I would usually have, for Dylon Clarke. It is a one newspaper town, and I really kind of had to like dig as much as possible to put this together. So just to give you a sense of place, I mentioned that Nevis is the sister island of St. Kitts. St. Kitts and Nevis do form one country called the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. If you were to travel to Nevis by airplane or cruise ship, which I imagine is how like most people get there, you would actually first land in St. Kitts, and then you have to take the ferry or the water taxi over to Nevis.
Right. Makes for a long day of travel.
Yeah, no, it was exhausting. Like it's a full, because so there are only like 3 airports in the US that have direct flights to St. Kitts, and we are not near any of them.
Nope.
And I mean, like we have all of the DC airports around us, and those are not.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a big long day of travel. We had to go to Miami. The majority of the population is of African descent, as enslaved people were brought over to work on the sugar plantations that dotted the island. But there are minority communities of British, Portuguese, and Lebanese people. I actually noticed a large number of expats while we were there from all over: Jamaica, England, Norway, Guyana. It seemed as though a lot of people just go on vacation on Nevis and decide to stay.
That's definitely what it sounded like. I think even the people that owned the hotel that we were staying at, I think that's basically what happened with them. They showed up, they found this property, and they decided to never leave.
Yeah. They were like horseback riding or something and saw these abandoned buildings, and they're like, oh, let's take this. Now, like I said, this case did surprise me, not because a 17-year-old went missing, but because of the circumstances surrounding it. I have never been on vacation anywhere that I felt more safe, which you already kind of said. Our hotel was made up of a series of bungalows, and, now that we're gone, I feel okay admitting that we hardly even ever locked or shut our door.
Well, yeah. Even if we had locked our door, that term of locking is,
It's like a
latch.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
basically like locking a gate at your house.
Yeah.
Like there's not a whole lot to it.
Right.
But, we had a screened-in porch and none of the rooms had air conditioning. So, like, when we would leave during the day, if we would go out to the restaurant, if we had breakfast, or even if we would, like, go into town and, like, really be gone, it was just more pleasant if we, like, left the room door and all of the windows open.
Yeah, I was doing that every day until I had the incident with the monkeys on the front porch. and then I decided that I should probably close the doors when I'm not there because I don't know what the hell those monkeys are going to do in my room. I mean, the one came up on the porch and peed all over the porch, so I can only imagine what they'd do if they got into the room.
Yeah, I am so angry. So this happened at, like, the day after I left, and I'm obsessed with monkeys. And so seeing them made me so happy. And I was already bitter that Ethan was staying there for another week while I had to come home and take care of the kids and, like, go back to work. And the next day he sends me this picture of a monkey in the hammock on the porch.
Yep. They were just chilling in my hammock.
Oh my God, I was so I still haven't forgiven you for that, honestly. I'm so mad. But yeah, that's definitely a picture we should post for the listeners because it was amazing. We actually celebrated your birthday while we were down there, which is part of the reason why I went. And we did that by going on a guided ATV tour of the island. Now, when we did that, I already knew I was going to look into this case. So, like, I was kind of grilling our guide about what life was like on Nevis.
Yeah.
He talked about how safe it was, but said that they had these, like, little gangs of basically high school kids is kind of like how he described it almost.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's exactly what he said. He said little gangs.
Yeah, he said little gangs.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell whether he was referring to, like, the size of the gang itself or, like, they were just little.
Yeah, I think
because they were kids.
I think both.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, and like with the research that I've done into this case, like I do. I think both. Like, I think it's a very, like, small number of people and a lot of them are very young. So yeah, that was all interesting. But as it turns out, like, that is these little gangs, like, is more than likely kind of what this case is about. Dylon Clarke lived in Church Ground, which is a village in the southwestern portion of Nevis. Church Ground is home to Fig Tree Church, which was the location where famed British naval commander Horatio Nelson married Nevisian plantation widow Frances Nisbet in 1787.
All right.
Yeah. So Nevis also is the birthplace of Alexander Hamilton.
Right,
which
and we saw his house.
We did. That's a museum now as well. Dylon was a fifth form student at the Charlestown Secondary School. Like I mentioned, there isn't a lot of biographical information available on him, but I haven't read anything that indicated that he was involved in any of these little gangs or crime or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, he was a pretty ordinary high school kid who was learning how to be a mechanic and just, generally planning his future. But even if Dylon wasn't directly involved in Nevis's small criminal element, he certainly knew people who were, including some of his close friends. Now, again, this is an island where it seems like literally everyone knows each other. So it seems like it would be kind of impossible not to be involved with criminals in some way, or like anyone else who exists on that island for that matter.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 2 days into the trip, everybody knew who I was, and even though I was trying to keep a low profile, everybody quickly found out what I was there for.
Right. The finding out why you were there was the funny part, but like, I mean, yes, you stick out. I mean, like, you're a white dude with a bunch of tattoos. Like, that's not super surprising. But like, one of the people that we were with was a black woman who, like, very much fits in, and they're like, no.
Oh yeah, no. Well, it's also because we're young. I mean,
Yeah.
the majority of the guests that were at the hotel
were old. Yeah,
were
a lot older
and British.
And we're old, but like, we're not still in this demographic.
Yeah.
But Dylon happened to be good friends with another teenager nearby, and this boy was heading down a very dark path. On Christmas Eve of 2011, 17-year-old Zameek Haliger was stabbed to death around 11:25 p.m. on the island's main road near Dr. Walwyn's Plaza. Dr. Walwyn's Plaza is in Charlestown near the water, and Charlestown is the capital of Nevis. Zameek was an employee of Ram's Supermarket and had just moved to Nevis from St. Kitts. He was the son of Arlene Hull and Mick Stokes, and Mick Stokes is a popular musician in the area. Zameek was the youngest of Stokes' 7 children and was following in his father's musical footsteps by learning how to play the drums. This all came from an interview with SKN Vibes, and in that same article, it says that Zameek had been stabbed by, quote, a number of individuals, end quote. Now, this is the only news article that I'd seen that mentioned. Every other news source only mentions a single suspect. Now, that single suspect was quickly arrested, with news of this reaching papers on December 30th, less than a week after the murder. The suspect's name wasn't released at the time because he was only 16.
Wow.
Yes, but he was later revealed to be Patrick Howell Jr. Patrick lived in Cane Gardens, which is close to Dylon's church ground home. According to Dylon's mother, Yvette Clarke, Dylon considered Patrick to be a good friend. But Dylon allegedly also witnessed the stabbing and gave a statement to police implicating his friend. Now, this is where things get interesting. This is obviously a different criminal justice system than what we're used to. So after Dylon gave this statement, it was apparently turned over to Howell's attorney.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I have no idea if Dylon's name was redacted or anything like that, but it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like it was just given to him as is. So Howell's attorney has this witness statement implicating his client, which, obviously he's going to share with Howell.
Yeah.
And this is obviously worrisome. But what's even worse is that days later, Howell was released on bail, awaiting his trial. Dylon's mother, Yvette, said of this chain of events, quote, I thought no one would have seen my son's statement until they reached into court, but the officer told me they had to hand it over to the boy's lawyer so the boy was able to see what Dylon said, end quote. Now, I don't know if this decision was made prior to Howell being released on bail or if it happened afterwards, but at some point, Dylon told authorities that he would no longer testify against Howell.
Well, yeah.
Right? I mean, we don't know if his thought process, was maybe he wasn't as sure as he thought he was, or if he realized that this was a bad situation he was in. But whatever the reason, it makes sense that on April 28th, Dylon decided to head over to Patrick Howell Jr.'s home to maybe try to smooth things over and reassure him that he wasn't going to cause him any trouble in this matter.
Still not the safest idea, but...
No, but I mean, you can get, again, they're friends, they're teenagers, you can get where he's coming from,
Sure.
And that's exactly what Yvette thinks happened. She told the St. Kitts Observer that this was the fatal mistake that her son made. Quote, look how my son left me that Saturday and walked himself right over into that boy's hands. He left home not knowing he was going for them to kill him, end quote. So let's take a minute to talk about Dylon's known whereabouts on April 28th and why many in the community, not just Yvette, believe this is the chain of events. The original newspaper story said that Dylon left his home and told his family he was going out for a walk. In the St. Kitts Observer article I just mentioned, Yvette told them that he had told her he was going to a friend's house. Now, this article was published on July 19th, 2013, just over a year after her son's disappearance. Dylon was seen in the vicinity of Moonlight Bar, which is close to his home in Church Ground. Apparently, it was a 3-minute walk. And he was seen there sometime up until about 6 p.m. He left his house at around 4. That was the only known sighting of him that day, and nothing I read said anything about him being with anyone else or if he was alone or waiting for somebody or any of that information. So unfortunately, in terms of his movements after he left the home, that's all we really know for sure. As I mentioned at the beginning, his family reported his disappearance quickly, and a search was launched the next day on April 29th. Nevis is such a small community that the whole island is basically on a group chat. According to an article on April 30th, the Monday after Dylon went missing, quote, "The information has been circulating via BlackBerry messages, and investigations made by this publication confirmed that searches are being made by the 17-year-old's relatives, friends, and members of the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force," end quote. And this BlackBerry message that was circulating around said, quote, "Please assist at any cause. He has the CXC exams to do and his life to look forward to. Anyone knows his whereabouts, please contact the police," end quote. And this message started circulating before the police even officially released his information.
That's crazy.
Yeah. In the early days, there was, of course, hope that Dylon would be found alive.
Mm-hmm.
Search and rescue volunteers and officers combed the island for days looking for him. Unfortunately, they saw no sign of the boy.
It is important to note here that, yes, it's a tropical island. A lot of times I'm sure people would think that there's deadly insects or animals or whatever on the island. And that's also another weird thing about Nevis is there's nothing poisonous on the island.
Oh, I don't think I even really thought about that.
There's no chance that he got bit by some poisonous snake or something like that and was wandering around in the jungle or whatever, because there's nothing poisonous on the island. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, that is interesting. So because of Nevis's small size, their resources were limited. For instance, they don't have cadaver dogs.
Right.
So it took about a month for them to coordinate with the U.S. Virgin Islands to come over with 2 of their cadaver dogs to perform a search. And when they did, they got a hit. The cadaver dogs were able to pick up Dylon's scent at Moonlight Bar and then followed it straight to Patrick Howell Jr.'s home about a mile away.
Wow.
Yeah. The dogs alerted twice on the property, and so they were able to dig. The police, not the dogs. They searched for Dylon's body, but they did not find the missing teenager or, any bones or any hard evidence that he was there. According to St. Croix Chief of Police Christopher Howell, who helped lead the search, the dogs alerting in the way that they did indicated that the body was there at one time and then moved. He also said that Nevis police would take soil samples that would hopefully uncover more evidence. So they didn't find any like blood or anything like that, any physical evidence
Right,
in terms
no
of like
clothes.
clothing. Exactly. Right. Nothing along those lines. The cadaver dogs did lead them straight there though and alerted twice. The full search with the dogs lasted for 2 days, and at the end, Nevis police kind of threw up their hands, even though they had this like one great lead. According to them, they basically did what they could do, and now it was up to the public to come forward, which we hear so often in these cases, and it like boggles my mind every single time.
Yeah. We did what we could.
Like, guess you got to confess.
Yeah.
It's so weird because again, like the soil samples, right? Like that's brought up in this article, and this it wasn't even an article, it was like a press release from the US Virgin Islands saying that they like brought these dogs over to assist in this case. But like I never saw another mention of the soil sample ever again. So I have no idea what happened with any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine even if they had taken soil samples, they would have known what to do with it. I mean, not to bust on St. Kitts and Nevis police, but like the majority of them don't even carry weapons.
Yeah, and we do actually talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I don't know. I am really curious as to like what was done and what was missed and what could have been done. And again, because there's such scant news coverage, like it's really kind of hard to piece together.
Yeah.
Assistant Commissioner of Police and head of the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force Division, Robert Libbard, that is quite a title, said that Dylon's case would remain open. Quote, "This matter is an ongoing matter. We are not going to close this case, and so I'm appealing to the public to come forward with whatever information that they may have. We are still looking to the public to share whatever information concerning this case and any other case. We cannot do it by ourselves, and so we rely on the public to share information." End quote.
All right.
I mean, life would be a lot easier if people would just tell about crimes.
Tell the truth.
Right?
Yeah.
And be like, I saw a crime. I did a crime.
Yeah.
Let me give you the details.
That would make police work a lot easier.
Right? Gosh. But just to quote the people who may be thinking that talking to police is exactly what led to Dylon's disappearance, he quickly added, quote, "I must tell you that the information that we get is going to be held confidentially. We are not going to disclose who gave what or anything like that. And just in case you have any doubt, call me." End quote. And then he gave his phone number.
Oh, God. Yeah, it's going to be confidential, just like it was for Dylon.
Yeah. As the summer of 2012 went on, Dylon's family did not give up trying to find him. A user who went by the name Bainham posted on CNN's iReport, and you probably don't know, but I was a giant nerd, and so I very much did know about this. iReport is a kind of citizen journalism site where people could post about local news that they wanted to get covered. So you would get, this was in the early days of cell phone cameras and stuff. And so people would post videos and photos of things that were happening. And basically it was just a really easy way for CNN producers to go in and scoop stuff up with minimal effort. But anyway, so this guy posted on the site twice saying that he was Dylon's cousin. He made an appeal for people to keep searching and keep getting Dylon's name out there. In his first post, he said that people were questioning their justice system. And in his second post on July 26, 2012, he said, quote, "The suspect is still free and Dylon is still missing. Members of the St. Kitts and Nevis community are outraged." End quote. And indeed, Patrick Howell Jr. did remain free on bail even after the cadaver dogs tracked Dylon Clarke's scent to his home. It appeared as though without Dylon's testimony, prosecutors are having a difficult time building a case against Howell for Zameek Haliger's death. He was still out on bail a year and a half after the murder and over a year after Dylon's disappearance.
I wonder, are the prosecutors going to ask for help from the public too?
They did not that I could see. No, they were pretty quiet about this.
Okay.
Even though basically the entire island had concluded by this point that Howell was getting away with not one but two murders, weirdly, Police Commissioner G.G. Walwyn disagreed. He stated that Howell had no motive to kill Dylon because Dylon had already refused to testify against him in court.
Except that he had already given a statement.
Yeah, but then he changed his mind, so it's fine. Nothing bad could have happened.
Right, yeah, no, there's no reason to kill him then.
Yeah. And obviously, okay, you get it to an extent, but that's a pretty bold claim to make over a year after he went missing and cadaver dogs picked up a scent at Howell's house.
Right.
Why are you coming out and saying that then? It's also interesting because Dylon's disappearance was a main factor in keeping Zameek's case from moving forward. According to the Evidence Act of 2012, the statement that Dylon had made to police could only be used in court if he is proven or presumed dead. And at this point, he was neither. He was simply a missing person. And it is really interesting because, all right, and I didn't write this. This is kind of an aside, and I do kind of get more into the laws of Nevis and homicide rates and things like that a little bit later. But just as an aside, I find this particularly interesting because the year in 2011, so 2011 was when Zameek was murdered, and there were 35 murders that year, and I talk about that in more detail later on. But I read an article that had basically a small rundown of all of the homicides.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very straightforward, right? Like, there's a dead guy, you find him. There aren't these like people disappear, their bodies are hidden. Like, they're, I personally, maybe just having watched Dexter where he like would take people out on his boat and throw them into the ocean. Like, being on an island, I would have expected more of that. But like,
Sure.
the way that just like straight homicides work, like, people are killed and left where they are in Nevis. Like, there's not a lot of body concealment going on. So I have to wonder if this was specifically done in a way to make it so that he would not be known to be dead or presumed dead.
That's a big assumption, thinking that Howell would know that law. He was what, 17?
16. So yeah, Dylon was 17, Patrick was 16. And I agree. But on the other case, if you also take it at face value and think that Patrick did murder Dylon, he apparently had enough wherewithal to hide the body.
Right.
So if he was so good at doing that, I mean, I don't know that it's that much of a stretch to know, like, for him to have done that for a specific reason. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's just, I just found that interesting.
Yeah.
That because of the way that Evidence Act of 2012 was written, that like, as long as Dylon remains quote unquote missing, like, he cannot touch Patrick legally. Now, if you thought that Patrick Howell's incredible good luck with the justice system would help keep him out of trouble, you would be wrong. In November of 2013, he was arrested again, this time for battery on police and threatening language. He went before the magistrate court on November 26, 2013, and was accused of beating and using threatening language toward Kevin Charles, a member of the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force.
This guy's... He really thinks of himself as a gangster.
He does. And I mean, he would have been like 17 at this time.
Jeez.
Yeah. The prosecution came to court ready to begin the trial on either that day or the next. So like, I think this event happened on maybe a Friday or Saturday. And so his first court appearance was on Tuesday. And prosecution was like, all right, let's do it. Like, we're ready. But his defense attorney said that he had actually just gotten the case and he needed to do his due diligence and review surveillance footage and other evidence. And so he asked that while he was doing that his client would be released on bail. So the prosecution was like, oh, this guy, the one who was already out on bail for stabbing some dude and is now standing here being accused of assaulting a police officer? No, thank you. And the judge agreed.
Oh, good.
I know. And so Howell was remanded without bail, with the next hearing scheduled for December 3rd. So just like a week later. Okay. So they were trying, it seemed like they were just like really trying to like move this case through the court. But unfortunately, I could not find any record of what ultimately happened with that trial. I have no idea if they did go to court on December 3rd. I don't know if it was the actual trial. I don't know if he pled guilty. I don't know what happened at all. I saw no more mention of this case after that. All I know is that he was arrested for beating up a police officer in November 2013. Don't know what happened there. He was held without bail for some period of time. Now, a few months later, in February 2014, it was Dylon, not Patrick Howell, who was back in the news. There was some brief hope in his case after a rumor circulated around the island that Dylon's body had finally been found on an empty plot of land. Unfortunately, what actually happened was that a cell phone was found, and people thought that like this might have been Dylon's missing cell phone. So a police officer went to the scene and found the phone, but like didn't find any evidence of a body or anything like that. And I also don't know if the phone was ever tied to Dylon. Like, my guess is that the whole thing was just completely unrelated. And this was literally, tiny island gossip that got out of control. Dylon's case got quiet again, and Patrick managed to stay out of the news for a few years, at least. In June of 2016, Patrick Howell Jr. was arrested once again, this time for possession of an illegal firearm, possession of ammunition, and smuggling of firearm. He was found guilty of all 3 charges on February 16, 2017. He was sentenced to 2 years for the smuggling charge, 5 years for the ammunition charge, and 6 years for the possession of a firearm charge. The sentences were to run concurrently, meaning that he basically received a 6-year sentence.
Right.
Yeah. So we're recording this in March of 2022, so it would stand to reason that Howell would still be in prison serving out this sentence.
But
yeah, he is not.
okay.
So we'll get to that in a moment, but just keep that in mind that theoretically he should currently be in prison, and he should have been in prison since 2017. 2019 brought the first hope in years that Zameek Haliger and, by extension, Dylon Clarke could finally receive justice. Once the 7-year anniversary of Dylon's disappearance occurred, his family was able to go to court and have him legally declared deceased. This would then pave the way for his police statement to be able to be used in the long-awaited trial of Zameek Haliger's death. Unfortunately, as of this recording, that does not seem to have happened yet.
Why?
I have no idea. So in 2019, right before the 7-year anniversary, there was an article, and, of course, we linked to all this on our blog and a lot of it in our show notes, but the headline of the article was something like, "Could teen point to killer from beyond the grave?" Something like that. But the whole purpose of it was hey, the 7 years is up. Dylon's going to be declared dead. They interviewed his mom. She was going to go do it. Her thing was yes, we're going to have this legally done in the courts. I know that this boy killed him. My son has been dead since the night he disappeared.
Right.
And I want him to pay for this. And so her thing was she was going to have him declared dead so that the courts could do what they could on their end with the statement that Dylon gave. And then she was also going to hold a memorial for her son, which she had not done up until that point. So they had this whole article, and, it's okay, it's going to happen. Now, we've been waiting for 7 years. And Zameek Haliger has not gotten justice. Dylon Clarke has not gotten justice. Patrick Howell Jr. has been out here for the past 7 years wreaking havoc on this small island. Let's go. That is it. Could not find a single other thing after that.
Do you think that's for lack of reporting, or do you think that just nothing has been done?
Well, okay. So again, I think the reporting thing is an issue. However, this is such a big case on this island that I think that if anything significant had happened, that there would have been something. I just don't think that anything's happened. So before we get to where everything stands today, I do want to take a few moments to talk about crime and guns in Nevis. Like I mentioned before, we definitely had the impression that guns were not really a thing there for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I saw maybe 3 or 4 on security guards and police while we were there, but that was it.
Yeah, and you mentioned that most police officers don't carry guns.
Yeah.
And so I kind of thought it was like England, where, most of the officers don't carry guns, and you could have hunting rifles and things like that, but you couldn't just have a friggin' pistol strapped to you like you can here,
Right.
So I thought it was kind of more like that. However, the rate of homicides by firearm is actually much higher than the US. So I always just assumed we were number one in that regard. I did not think there was another country on earth that had a higher rate of gun deaths than we do. But apparently they do. So the US rate per 100,000 residents is 3.4, while in St. Kitts and Nevis, it's currently around 22.7. So meaning per 100,000 residents, 22.7 in St. Kitts and Nevis would die by firearm, 3.4 would die in the U.S. However, again, Nevis is only 12,000 people, so like you really have to kind of extrapolate out to even get to those numbers.
Right, and those numbers include St. Kitts.
Correct, yeah.
Right. So it's even further skewed.
Yeah, exactly. Now, just to put it in perspective, like based on actual population, 2011, when Zamik Haliger was murdered, was also Nevis's bloodiest year on record. They recorded a total of 35 homicides, with Zamik being number 34. Many of these, most of them, in fact, were gun-related homicides, which, again, I was just really surprised about.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking to hear that, given how safe it felt.
Yeah, absolutely. In 2017, the St. Kitts and Nevis government passed an amended firearms law in hopes of combating gun crime on the island. The main thrust of the amendment was to increase the penalty for illegal possession and use of firearms. Interestingly, 2017 is also when Patrick Howell received his 6-year sentence for firearms-related charges that he apparently did not serve the full length of. Now, the good thing about this amended law is that it was just one part of the government's plan to reduce crime. Senator Nigel Carty, who is the former Minister of Education and Information, said, quote, "Dealing with the issue of crime can hardly ever be dealt with solely as a matter of increasing penalties. You could put it to 30, you could put it to 100. It really doesn't matter because in my view, and as the studies have revealed, that in and of itself will not lead an abating of crime in the country," end quote. And
I mean that's true everywhere. I mean,
again, just look at America.
The death penalty isn't a deterrent here.
No.
So like,
and like, yeah, we proved in the last several decades in this country that like throwing an entire generation of young men into prison doesn't actually fix crime.
Yeah, that's so weird.
So weird. It actually leads to like generational trauma and problems and like more crime down the line. So strange when you break up families and societies, what happens? The Prime Minister, the Honorable Timothy Harris, agreed, promising that this was just part of a holistic approach to combating crime. Now, just a few weeks ago, in the beginning of March of 2022, he announced that the government had made significant investments within the security sector to curb the increase of violent crime in St. Kitts and Nevis. One such investment was into a program called the Alternative Lifestyle Pathway Program, ALPP, also called the Peace Program. Major Kayode Sutton, the ALPP coordinator, describes it as, quote, "a program carefully developed by experts in the field of social intervention, crime, and violence to lend an opportunity to at-risk individuals in our society to provide them with a second chance to live a life free of crime and violence and to learn to become productive contributors and respected members of the society. It focuses on the at-risk, marginalized, disenfranchised, and traumatized in our society and also persons meeting its criteria that are in need of being re-socialized, having been released from incarceration," end quote.
That was a lot.
It was a lot. I mean, wow. Imagine treating people like humans who...
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good.
Like if you give them opportunities and, you know, don't treat them like throwaways, like maybe you could actually improve lives and crime rates while you're at it. So this program isn't new. I said like this announcement was just made a few weeks ago, but it's been around for years. They just had reached phase 3 this year in 2022. Now, phase 3 focuses mainly on life skills training. Major Sutton went on to explain, quote, "This program has 2 components, namely the delivery of soft skills and hard skills. The soft skills entail teaching the participants to respect self and others, introduction to business, tolerance, communication, and listening skills, problem solving, anger management, empathy, developing goals, self-management, self-concept, and the list goes on. The hard skills entail essential vocational training like general construction, AC installation and servicing, motor vehicle service and repairs for men and women, upholstery, backhoe operations, welding, basic electrical and electronics, general cosmetology, basic sound engineering, landscaping, fish pot making, cooking and cake making, and so forth. End quote.
It's funny that you said AC installation and
When
maintenance.
nowhere has air conditioning.
I think I went into 2 buildings there that had air
I only went into
conditioning.
one. That one restaurant we went to for your birthday.
Yeah, I went into a liquor store later after you had left.
Not the one we went to?
No.
Because that was not
That
air
didn't have air
conditioned.
conditioning. No.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. It reminds me, and this is going to be like dating myself, and I don't know if you watched as much TV as I did when you were little, because, you know, we're the same age, but it reminds me of the Sally Struthers ECPI commercials. Like, do you want to learn skills? Sure, we all do. Electrical engineering. Like, you don't remember those?
Nope.
Yeah, so
Lost me.
So Sally Struthers was big on the infomercials in the 80s. She would do the Feed the Children commercials.
Yeah, I
You remember
know.
those?
Yeah.
Yeah, but she also did ECPI, which is this like mail order educational course so you could get like certificates in different like industry.
Vocations.
Yeah, vocations. Yeah, exactly. So it reminded me of that. But regardless, so it's very interesting. And again, it just goes along with this holistic approach, like they said, you know, because just stricter punishments, more time in prison, like that's not going to do anything.
Right.
And Major Sutton says that since they've implemented the ALPP, they have seen a significant decrease in homicides and gun-related crime. In fact, St. Kitts and Nevis law enforcement recently reported a 43% reduction in the crime rate across the island. And this is the highest reduction in the past 20 years. In fact, there were only 13 homicides reported in 2021, a sharp decrease from the 35 reported in 2011.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
Yeah. So, I mean, what they're doing is clearly working. And again, I think it's really just changing like the whole like social culture of an island. And I think when you have such a small population, that's a lot easier to do.
Oh, for sure.
As
yeah.
opposed to like America, where we have like 1 billion people, you know, like different states and whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it's just such a much more cohesive culture. So if you like make these changes, you can see the ripple effect, I think, very quickly.
Yeah.
So while all of this is certainly good news for the citizens of Nevis, crime does still occur, and a good amount of it appears to continue to come at the hands of Patrick Howell Jr.
He's in it again?
Oh, yeah. Even though he should still theoretically be in prison until 2023, serving his sentence for those gun charges, he was let go early. I don't know exactly when, but he was definitely out in July of 2021, because at that point, the then 26-year-old was charged with the murder of a man named Travis Clarke. And I don't think he's related to Dylon Clarke, but, you know, there's no mention of that, so I'm just hoping it's a coincidence.
Mm.
According to winfm.com, on July 16th, 2021, 36-year-old Clarke was sitting on a stoop in the Happy Hill Drive area when an armed assailant pursued him and shot him several times. He died from severe blood loss. And I find it very interesting that Howell was locked up on these gun charges, got released early, and then still was able to like get a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then goes and shoots a guy.
Yeah. And I don't know how long he had been out by this point, but still, like, it's a lot. The next day, July 17th, Patrick Howell Jr. turned himself into police, accompanied by one of his parents. At that point, he was charged not only for Travis Clarke's murder, but for robbery and larceny, which apparently stemmed from him carjacking a woman as he was making his escape.
Jesus.
Yeah.
This guy really is the scourge of the island.
He really is. Like, it's crazy. And again, if you're thinking that maybe he turned himself in because he like grew a conscience, that does not appear to be the case.
Mm.
The next day, July 18th, he apparently escaped from custody.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was apprehended, and then that charge was added onto everything else on July 20th. At that point, he was remanded to Her Majesty's prison. So now when I started to really starting to write this episode and researching this, it was after I was already back. And so you were still there, and I texted you one day and I was like, hey, I try to get a sense of what things are like there. Are crimes like this common? Is this weird? What do the people on the island feel about, this? Do they know about Dylon Clarke? Because again, so this was different because I actually did give you the name of the person that we're talking about, which, you usually don't know anything about the case.
Yeah, I usually don't do any research for the case.
So, so I didn't really tell you anything about it, but I just said hey, the person who's missing is, this guy named Dylon Clarke. And so I was see what you can find out, basically.
Yeah, so I went to a bartender that, I had, I guess, not really become friends with, but, I frequented the establishment while I was there, and he and I had chatted a few times, but he would prefer us not to use his name, so we'll just call him Bob. As soon as I mentioned Dylon Clarke, he was like, oh yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. Everybody on the island knows about him and Patrick Howell.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you said that Patrick Howell's serving time for his last murder, because that's what Bob told me. He said,
"Oh, is it?"
Yeah, he said, yeah, Patrick's in jail, but for another murder.
Oh, you know what? What's really actually funny is I think you did mention that to me when we were texting about this, but I hadn't gotten to that point in my research yet.
Yeah.
So I actually didn't know that at the time. So I didn't make that connection.
Yeah, and the general take of it was the same thing that we had mentioned before, that there are these teenage gangs. Nobody on the island is really happy about that.
Sure.
Of course, nobody's.
You're not putting that on your tourism brochures. Yeah.
It was a different vibe. It was the general feel is that what little crime there is a nuisance.
Yeah.
A real nuisance that people actually care about. As opposed to here, it's meh, crime is crime, whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned something when we started talking about gun violence, because I was initially asking him about the gun laws and whatnot. He mentioned something that you said that you couldn't find any evidence of, but it is interesting.
Well, I didn't look specifically that hard. So don't, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It just didn't come up.
So he mentioned that the government has offered basically a gun buyback program and put it out there. If you turn in your weapons, they pay a certain amount of money. That's supposed to reduce the amount of guns on the street. Of course, the way he described it was that basically these known gang members go and turn in their old guns, and they keep their nicer guns, just in case they need them.
So, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I couldn't find evidence of that, but I mean, he would know better than I would. So yeah. I don't know.
And I don't know whether it's a legitimate gun buyback program or if it's rumor mill,
right?
Where they're paying these criminals to, turn in their guns or whatever. But that was the one thing that I think stood out.
Yeah.
Most.
It is really interesting. And I didn't find a lot of information about, some of the victims. Cause again, I was looking at that kind of rundown of 2011 homicides, because that was the record breaking year in Nevis. And, I couldn't really tell how much of it was criminal on criminal type.
Violence, yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, who were the victims?
Yeah, I just couldn't tell a whole lot about that. There's one, I think the last one of 2011, a man who was murdered on December 30th was an expat from Florida or something, who was just killed. But like I said, with all of them, it was basically a lot of them were shot, and a lot of them were just left where they were shot. And then this the most recent murder of Travis Clarke that Patrick Howell Jr. is currently serving time for, I'm guessing, again, never found out, what his sentence ultimately was or whatever actually happened. But, according to Bob the bartender, it does appear that he is still in prison for that. So I looked up Travis Clarke, and he had been in prison before. Like, he had been accused of armed robbery and stuff like that. So, like, I don't know, what if
that was some sort of retribution.
Yeah, I don't know what the whole deal is there.
Yeah.
But, regardless, like, there definitely is something going on. And statistically, Patrick Howell Jr., like, honestly seems to be behind
a lot of it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's definitely running the numbers up.
He really is. So, yeah, I'm just really interested to see, if anything ends up happening, if they're just saying, okay, like, he's in prison for Travis Clarke's death, he's gone, like, that's enough.
Yeah.
Or if anyone is going to take up Zamik's case or Dylon's case,
right.
Because we're coming up next month on the 10-year anniversary of Dylon's disappearance. His body has never been found. His family has never gotten answers. They have a pretty good idea of what happened.
Sure.
But, those are not the questions you want to have left unanswered when it comes to somebody you love. And unfortunately, no one has come forward with any substantial information on Dylon's case in the nearly 10 years since he was last seen. Despite the lack of movement in her son's case, Yvette Clarke still holds out hope that she and her family will one day receive answers. Quote, "One day it will come to the light what happened to my son. What happens in the dark must come in the light." End quote. Dylon Clarke has been missing from church grounds Nevis since April 28, 2012. At the time of his disappearance, he was 5'8" tall and around 140 pounds. Dylon is a black male with a dark complexion. He had black hair and dark brown eyes. He has a scar on the left side of his face. Dylon was last seen wearing a yellow polo shirt, jeans, and Nike sandals. Dylon was 17 when he went missing. He would be 27 today. Anyone with information on Dylon Clarke's disappearance is urged to call the Charlestown Police Station at 869-469-5391. You can see all the sources for this episode along with photos and videos at our website, andthentheywere.gone.com.
And be sure to follow us on social, and Then They Were Gone Pod on Facebook and at ATTWG Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe and consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It will help new listeners find us. And the more people that listen, the more chances we have of bringing someone home.
And we'll see you here next week for a brand new episode.
See you next week.
And Then They Were Gone is hosted by Kona Gallagher and Ethan Flick. All research, writing, and editing is done by Kona Gallagher. Theme music is The Stork by Ketsa. Additional music is provided by Kai Engel. And Then They Were Gone is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can